One of the things that I learned specifically about throwing a frisbee is that if I hold on to it too tightly, it's going to mess up my aim and my throwing. What happens? If I hold on to that sucker too tight and I'm so focused and zoned in and I want to hit a mark, but I don't just allow it to release in the fullness of the expression of the extension of my arm, and I hold on to it too tightly, I release it over here. And every time I do that, I yell the word oi. So I do an oi. I like lob it. So it was telling me today, don't hold on so tightly. Attachments. Attachments here, when we hold on to things so tightly, it has to do quite possibly with a fear of loss. Now, I wouldn't say that it's so much with Frisbee a fear of loss, because I'm just lobbing the volleyball, or the volleyball. That's another story for another day. I'm lobbing that Frisbee. But it was a principle that I was getting in the Gimel, in the walking, in the giving, and the receiving. If I'm holding on something too tightly, then I don't have the ability to give abundantly. And what has Ken been sharing with us? The generosity of nobility. If you hold on to things too tight, you're restricting, you're not moving in flow. And nobility generously gives. I'm like, oh my God, that's so good. And I saw what happened when I was generously giving, when I wasn't holding on too tight and I was in flow. That state of abundance and flow, which is directly connected to Dalet. Timing. The timing of throwing a Frisbee is very important. When you Gimel, when you make a step, there's this beautiful procedure of taking a step and then releasing directly after the step. Now, I've watched Ken throw the Frisbee to me for a while now. And I love watching and observing. Observing is one of my favorite things to do now. I used to be just clueless and I just wouldn't pay attention because everything was focused this way, about me, my space, and what was going on here, that I just didn't have the ability to see outside of myself. Yeah, things were going on. I just wasn't paying attention. Now I love to observe. It doesn't really matter. I want to see what's going on out here because it's a reflection of me. So I was watching Ken, and there are times where he would have a biff, I call it a biff, where the Frisbee wasn't sailing and it would just make a nosedive, is usually when his foot and his hand were at the exact same time, and it would literally drive the Frisbee in the ground. And I thought about that and I was like, oh, the timing issue. So if I hold on too tight, I can't aim and shoot very well because I don't hit the mark. If I put my foot and my hand at the exact same time and not time it in the natural release, it's going to drive it into the ground. It's not going to lift. Nasa, to lift up. It will not have any lift. So I knew that there was something that was being said about the timing. The timing, the hanging on tonight too tight, yara. For some of you who have followed Ken's teachings for a while, or you've been listening to Ken and I for a while, you've heard us speak of the word Yara, because Yara is the first three letters of Jerusalem. Yara Shalom. And it means to flow, or aim, or shoot, or teach, or flow as water. So Yara, as I'm walking through all this, I'm like, oh my gosh, all of this is connected to my Yara. What am I aiming at? What am I shooting at? Am I flowing? Am I holding too tight? Am I allowing the natural progression of my foot, Gimel, to lead my hand? Interesting to know that the foot, Gimel, comes before the Yod and the Kaf, the hand. Do you think there's something being said to me about playing Frisbee and the foot and the hand and the letters? That's why I'm saying today was just this magical moment of going, oh my gosh, I see all of these principles that are being taught to me through the very letters and the actions that I do of the thing that brings me joy that I go and do every day. But I haven't stopped down to see what it was speaking to me and why I have so much joy doing it. Because when the timing is right and the foot goes before the hand and it's synchronously being done as a flow, that Frisbee finds its mark. And it's effortlessly done. It just is a natural flow. I don't have to put too much energy into it. I just release it and it hits its mark. What is one of the definitions of the word sin? To miss the mark. Interesting, right? We've talked about that before. I don't want to bring the letters in, but there's a lot that the letters are even speaking to us of what that word means, not what theology taught it to be. So the other aspect of it, and this is where it gets really interesting, I was focusing also today on part of my throw, and I noticed something. When my elbow is at my rib, we're going to talk about rib, and you're going to see where I'm going to be going and why I went popcorn champagne everywhere. When I throw the Frisbee and I keep my elbow into my rib, when I first started really learning to throw it, I could only throw it short distances. And what I realized, short distance throws, my elbow was in at my rib. Well, why is that? When I was learning to throw, I needed to have restricted movement so that I could, through inculcation and repetition of movement, have something that was allowing me to be able to develop that movement with my hand motion that was secure. It was secure. There's that Vav again. It was secure into my rib. So I could get used to this motion of my arm and my elbow working in being able to throw, Yara, that Frisbee. So I could trust that that movement through repetition was always going to be exactly what I needed. But I realized that if I needed distance, I couldn't keep my elbow at my rib. I had to extend it away. Now, here's what happens when the ego steps in. I'm playing Frisbee. I am trying to get some distance because sometimes Ken and I would play where we would start closer and then we would move. So if he threw something longer and I would catch it, I would have to throw from where I caught it and get to where he was. And we just play all kinds of fun games with this. Well, when I kept my elbow in and I would try to throw it, I would give a ton of freaking energy, man. I would just, try to get everything I could with as much oomph. Do you know how much energy I wasted? Because I will tell you what, because that elbow was in at the rib, it was only going to go a certain distance. It wasn't going to go any further than what it was allowed to because of the distance and the radius. Please connect these words to what Ken has been sharing with us as well. From the radius, because it was a short radius, which means the distance in which I could throw the Frisbee was limited. 2 radiuses make a sphere. If you have short radiuses, your sphere or your distance of that which is ability to aim and shoot at is going to be very minimalized. Your sphere of influence. Again, Frisbee's talking to me about these things that Ken has even been bringing in. So what did I have to do? When I realized that I needed to move my elbow out from my ribs, ego would step in and I would go, oh my God, I can't aim, and the egos are freaking out and judging it. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. And so the mind would enter in. I would start thinking about it too much. What do you think happened with my throws? They were terrible. They were all over the place. You got it, Rick. They were all over the place. But by golly, they went further, because that elbow went away from the rib, that place of that stability and safety. What I had to realize is that for inculcation's sake of that repetition of the movement, I had to trust that movement and feeling how I held the Frisbee, how lightly I held it, the position of my fingers, of that recognition, because I found a sweet spot that every time my fingers, and I just thought about it and I gave gratitude, and I'm like, oh, that place is familiar. I know that place. And if I just trusted and I could feel that place, that my inculcation movement allowed me to just flow and get the distance, and I wasn't expending needless energy. It was amazing to me to see what was happening. I was trusting the fact that I didn't have to have it in at the rib. I didn't have to have my training wheels on and having this little restricted movement. All of a sudden, the Frisbee was able to sail effortlessly further distance. And I just was blown away. I had never paid attention to that before until today. And I went, oh my God,